Awesome. Welcome to another episode of Making Action the Greatest Habit. I'm really excited to have Mr. Joe Coco on here today. He did a presentation in 2007 in front of me, and it was about these 8 milestone markers. I hope I said that correctly. And it totally changed my life. It was been one of the main things that I paid attention to in high school, and it's one of the things I took action on the most throughout my life. Because of him, I decided to buy a house, put money into savings, put money into a Roth IRA, and because of that, I feel like I'm doing much better in life. So thank you, Joe, for not only being here, but for the wonderful education.
My pleasure.
Yeah, yeah. I'd love to know because you have such an interesting background. Where were you born? I'd love just to understand.
Mother is from Chicago, and my father is a Cajun from Louisiana. And my father's uncle lived right next door to my mother back in the 40s and well, her whole life until they got married. But my dad met my mother when he was 11 and my mother was 12.
Okay.
And my mother was tasked with showing him around the city when he came to visit his uncle one summer.
Uh-huh.
And then many years later, my dad had joined the Marine Corps and he had come back to visit his uncle in Chicago much later. And he had met my mom again and they met again and fell in love and ended up getting married. And voila, here's me. My dad was a career Marine, and so our family moved around quite extensively.
Hmm.
I was born in, near Chicago, in a little suburb next to it. But I've lived in Kansas City, Denver, Washington, D.C., Parris Island, South Carolina, Yuma, Arizona, Hawaii. I graduated from high school in Japan at a Department of Defense school. So I've been around. And then my first 8.5 years after graduation from college was I was a Marine officer and I served in the Marine Corps for 8.5 years. So when you had met me, I moved up to Montana and taken over an office with Edward Jones Investments, and I was an investment or a financial advisor with them for many years. And then in 2009, I ended up striking out on my own and starting my own business. Now, Montana is the first place I've ever lived more than 3 years.
Wow. And you've been there for many years now, so that's pretty interesting.
We moved up here in 1993. We lived in 3 different houses since we've been up here. Currently living on an 11-acre homestead where I grow most of my own food.
Wow. And you have goats, right?
I have goats. I have 26 goats right now.
Oh my gosh. What out of curiosity, what made you want to settle down in Montana?
My When I was stationed in Okinawa after Desert Storm, my unit was tasked to go to the Philippines, and we were in Subic Bay, which is a naval station.
Mhm.
And while we were there, the volcano Mount Pinatubo erupted, and it was complete disintegration of civilization. There's no running water, no electricity, no energy of any kind. Water was very scarce, and what water we had, you had to be careful because it could have been contaminated with cholera or, sewage or whatever. And society just completely broke down. Um, that's a podcast in and of itself. But I decided then and there that whenever I had a choice of where I was going to live, there had to be a water source within walking distance of my house. And there had to be the ability to dig a straddle trench to go to the bathroom outdoors. So that was pretty much the criterion for where I was going to live when I got out of the Marine Corps. And Edward Jones Investments gave me the opportunity to go anywhere in the country that I wanted to. At that time, there was only about 750,000 people living in Montana, and it was the fourth largest landmass in the continental United States. So I said, send me there. So ended up coming to Whitefish, Montana, and lived in a place where I could walk to get water, and I could dig a straddle trench in the backyard if I had to.
Wow.
You know, Ian, when we met, I was a financial professional, but I've never relied on finances for my well-being. I was good at it. You know, I was fairly talented at making money, keeping money, but it's never been my God. It's just I've just been blessed to be able to have as much as I've ever needed. But if all of our investments go away tomorrow, I think I'll be just fine.
Wow, that's something I never would have expected you to say.
You know, at the founding of our nation, Alexander Hamilton, who was the Treasury Secretary for many years in the George Washington cabinet, and Thomas Jefferson, they had completely different ideas about what America should be.
Hmm.
And Alexander Hamilton envisioned America being a strong empire, similar to the empire of, say, Napoleon or Caesar. Whereas Thomas Jefferson, he always envisioned America to be a land of free yeoman farmers who were self-reliant, debt averse, people of good moral character that would live in communities and take care of one another and essentially need a very small and limited government. And I tell people all the time that I made my living in Hamilton's world, but I lived my life in Thomas Jefferson's world.
I love that. I love that. Where did you end up coming up with those two viewpoints? Was it just from reading, or how did you come across?
Pretty much just from reading, you know, is that at some point as you're reading, you're getting an idea of who Alexander Hamilton was,
Mhm.
and you get an idea of who Thomas Jefferson was. You're going, hey, wait a minute, I'm kind of a strange bird. It's because yeah, I'm making a comfortable living, giving people investment advice, which you know it was Alexander Hamilton who pushed for the first American national bank,
Huh.
and Thomas Jefferson was adamantly opposed to having a national bank. He was very debt averse, even though he was in debt up to his eyeballs. Is that his lifestyle was way more expensive than his ability to make money, and he spent a lot of money on wine and good life that he necessarily couldn't afford. But even so, he admired the Virginia farmer who was self-reliant, somebody who could butcher a hog and somebody who could grow corn and could do blacksmithing if necessary. You know, the jack of all trades was highly respected by Thomas Jefferson. Whereas, you know, Alexander Hamilton, he respected power. Yeah, he wanted to be strong and he wanted America to be strong.
Wow.
So, but out here in Montana, there's you know there's quite an ethos of Thomas Jefferson out here. You know, the idea of self-reliant, the rugged individualist, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But the reality, the honest is that the most successful people are not those who live on an island. It's those people who have learned how to rely on each other as opposed to rely on corporations or governments.
I like that. I like that concept. And to circle back, because I think everything you're saying is really fascinating. How did you end up coming up or running across these 8 milestone markers, if I'm saying it correctly?
Well, long before there was a Dave Ramsey, and I'm sure you and your listeners have heard of Dave Ramsey, there was a gentleman by the name of Larry Burkett. And Larry Burkett was probably the pioneer in the financial guru business. His his listening audience tended to be very charismatic, or I'm sorry, very fundamentalist, evangelical Christian. But he was extremely systematic about how people should manage money. And he believed that most of the ideas about how we should manage money could actually be found in this Holy Scriptures. So some of my ideas came from him, and then some of my ideas actually came from Dave Ramsey. You know, he's got his he calls them baby steps, and several of the baby steps have been incorporated into our 8 milestones. But one of the things that I've felt is that you know Dave Ramsey will get you to a comfortable retirement, but the last of our milestones is to create jobs and ministries. So, I'm at the point now where I can hire people to do things because I can. And from scripture, there's this concept of gleaning. I don't know if you're familiar with that term or not, but under Jewish law, farmers were supposed to leave some of the grain in their fields so that the poor could come and glean the food from the fields. So it wasn't really stealing, it was being left so that they could go and gather the food for themselves. And in that way, people could have dignity. It wasn't like they were begging on the streets, but they would actually have to do the work of going and getting their own food. And from that concept, today, there's this idea that in business, you ought not to try to capture every penny, that you should allow some other people to also prosper by making a living as well. And as a result, our last milestone is to create jobs and ministries. Is that when you get to the point where you become financially independent, you can't take the money with you, so you might as well share it. And the best way to share that is to in ministry, essentially people are doing work where they're not getting paid, so you can help finance that. And then with jobs, you can hire people to do jobs so that they can feed their own families. So I guess you could say that the 7 lower milestones, their goal is to get you to the final milestone, which is to create wealth and prosperity for other people as well.
Wow. How long did it take you to like come up with that entire concept all by itself?
Oh, let's see. It probably took me 15 years to solidify that. I had to get my own business because when you work for a large corporation like Edward Jones, they've got their own ideas about how they're going to present themselves to the public. And even though my ideas might have been attractive to some people, it was different than the message that Edward Jones was trying to give. So they weren't all that excited about my ideas. So when we actually started our own business, that gave us the freedom to start communicating and sharing some of the ideas that you're familiar with.
Mm-hmm. 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 Interesting. And I'm curious because you're saying us. Who was who is the other person?
My wife Linda, is that it's kind of interesting is that I obviously was giving financial advice working for a Fortune 500 company, and I was managing portfolios and helping people with retirement plans and that sort of thing. But I saw a lot of people who were making relatively good income who were making really bad decisions with their own money. And so I started studying Larry Burkett and getting some of his ideas. And I incorporated some of his ideas into my advice. And then there was a situation where at home, my wife wrote a bad check. And in a small town, you can't be the financial guy and have your family out writing bad checks. So I came down pretty hard and said, I'm going to start taking over the bill paying and yada, yada, yada. And but we ended up getting that fixed. And then my wife kind of had a vision that she wanted to start a ministry where we were going to help other people be wise with their finances. And that's kind of how we formed the Wealth Masters milestones. Is that we got together and we came up with a program. And right around the time that you and I met for the first time, we had just made a footprint in our area. We were doing several seminars a year, and we probably have talked to 400 or 500 people in a workshop environment over the years. And even today, that's 20 some odd years ago that we were doing those classes, and we still run into people that go, "Hey, Joe and Linda, we took your class and it was a life changer. We really appreciate it."
Wow. How did you guys start speaking at seminars and things like that? That's fascinating.
At first we started going just through the churches, the local churches. This is a time when Dave Ramsey was kind of coming into his own.
Okay.
But Dave Ramsey was on the radio and we were local. So churches enjoyed having us come in and give a 8-week or a 12-week presentation. So we'd meet every Wednesday night, for 12 weeks, and people would take our classes. So we had a workbook and with fill in the blanks and the whole 9 yards
Really?
that we had put together. But we had an impact in our town, and for a lot of people, that impact was positively life changing.
I agree. That's awesome. That's awesome. Do you still have the workbook?
I could probably dig one up. I suspect that we probably have a few extras around. Would you like one?
Yeah, I mean, that'd be amazing. I'd love to read more about what you guys have figured out and have done.
Sure. You know, a lot of it's dated, is that we put the stuff together over 20 years ago. So some of the stories and that sort of thing are a generation ago. But the concepts are the same, is that if you avoid debt and live within your means and give away money, and if you save money for the future, for the most part, you're cutting with the natural order of the universe.
Hmm.
Life's probably going to go better for you.
Nice. It's just kind of like logical reasoning at that point.
Exactly.
Wow, wow. I am curious, what would you suggest to someone who, let's say, was in their 20s or 30s and they're trying to figure out, what kind of career should I pursue to like do that type of action?
Picking careers, that's an excellent question, Ian, and I get asked that a lot, particularly with the group of people you're talking about, people in their early 20s. And I always tell them, as I say, the first thing you do is do a self-assessment and try to figure out what gift that you have that you naturally give away for free. So, for example, I have a friend of mine who every time he comes to my house, he finds something wrong with it. He'll go, "Hey, Joe, your doorknob on your front door is loose. How long has it been that way?" I go, "I never even thought about it till you brought it up." And he goes, "Well, let me go out to my truck." And he'll go get his tools and he'll tighten it up. And then we'll be having lunch and he goes, "Man, that drip on your faucet is just driving me nuts." And so he, he'll fix the drip in my faucet. And he has been extremely successful in the rental business, renting people equipment to do-it-yourself projects and that sort of thing. And his gift that he gives away for free is that he helps people with repairs. So he figured out how to do it. And I have opinions on everything. If you want to, raise dogs, or if you want to, plant geraniums, I've got opinions on everything. Raising kids, and so for me, it cut with the natural grain of who I am by going into a business where I could give people advice and get paid for it, because I was already giving people advice and opinions but not getting paid for it.
Wow.
So that's the first thing, Ian, is that figure out how it is that you were created. Were you created to be a teacher? Were you created to be a healer? Were you created to bring people together? Were you created to make things happen? Whatever it is that you're doing anyway, naturally, then try to figure out how you're going to make a living at it. That's number one, and that's the most important one. The second one is that where are you going to do it? Are you going to do it in a small town? Are you going to do it in a big city? Are you going to do it near a beach? Are you going to do it in the mountains? And the reason I say that, Ian, is because every time you move, every time you make a major change, it's expensive. Every time you move into a different house, you got to get new drapes. Every time you get a new job, you got to get new clothes. So it's one of those things where if you can minimize the number of changes that you're going to make, it's better.
Okay.
So why don't you figure out where you want to put your gravestone and just get there as early as you possibly can and start working there.
Wow, I never thought of it like that.
And then the third thing is that figure out how you're going to, or who you're going to do it with.
Okay.
So do you want to do it with a Fortune 500 company? And there's certainly pros and cons for doing so.
Okay.
Do you want to do it with a small business, a growing enterprise where you really admire and respect the owner?
Mhm.
Or do you want to do it yourself? And then once you've figured out what you were created to do, and you figure out where you're going to do it, then figure out who you're going to do it with, and then focus on doing that. So if you're going to work with a Fortune 500 company, don't interview with small companies. If you want to work for yourself, then say, okay, I might work for this Fortune 500 company for a few years to kind of learn what I'm doing, but I'm going to organize my life knowing that in 5 years I'm moving on.
Wow.
So that's the process that I would encourage young people to consider when they're figuring out what they're going to do with the rest of their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. Fascinating. And I really like how you pointed out doing this within a 5-year time frame.
You know, there's an old saying is that if you work for somebody in the first 5 years, you cost them money. And then if you stay longer than 5 years, it costs you money. Because ultimately, America was designed for the small business owner. I've seen it all the time. And probably the greatest example of this is like lawn care. Is that around here, the people working for lawn care companies, now it's a lot better now than it was 10 years ago. But right now they're making $20, $25 an hour, driving a lawnmower and weed whacking for folks. But the guy who actually owns the business, he's making $250,000. And the reason why is because that's what when he charges you $100 to cut his yard, and he's paying somebody else 25, he's keeping $75 for himself. So I don't care what it is, whether you own a pizza, a pizza restaurant, or whether you're a drywaller or a bricklayer or giving in financial advice.
Mhm.
America is going to reward those who are willing to take the risk of being in business for themselves.
Interesting.
So, but America is a beautiful place because you have choices, you have options. If you feel like you were created to work for a large company, you can. If you want to go into business for yourself, you can. So it's really up to you. We all learn from our mistakes, and I can't go back and fix my mistakes, but I stayed with a Fortune 500 company about 10 years too long. I lost a lot of opportunity by staying longer. And the reason I did, Ian, is because it was easy. I kind of cracked the code on how to do it. And I put up with a lot of nonsense just because of out of complacency. But a few things happened at the corporate level where I said, I just can't see myself doing this for another 20 years with these people. And
Wow.
I took the plunge and went into business for myself. And within 2 years, I was making the same money that I was making with the other firm. And in 4 years, I was making twice as much money.
Wow.
So looking back, just from the time value of money perspective,
Mhm.
it would have been way better for me to have left earlier than I did.
Wow.
Mm.
Wow. Wow. Interesting. And
Mm.
I'm just out of curiosity, how did you feel about the whole thing after reflecting on it?
Making the move. My background up until the time I moved to Montana was I was either a military kid or I was in the military. So my world was very myopic. I only saw the world through a lens like this.
Oh, okay.
And then when I started working with a Fortune 500 company, now this is the military, and then working for a Fortune 500 company, you only see this.
Okay.
And I wasn't really interested in looking and seeing what the rest of the world was like.
Hmm.
But when I started investigating other options than working for a Fortune 500 companies, all of a sudden the scope of opportunities was this wide.
Wow.
I'd never seen them before.
Mhm.
And then once I saw all those opportunities, I'm going, why did I wait this long to pursue this? And primarily the reason why is because I didn't know.
Okay.
And one of the things that I really get frustrated with about our public school system is that we're not really teaching kids how to succeed in the greatest nation the world has ever seen. A lot of the things that I've learned about how to succeed in America, I didn't learn in school. I learned it from successful people. And Ian, your name is almost like a household name in our house because we always go, man, Ian Tolson, he's come a long way, baby. And I know that you've told people about how I came in and talked to your class, but I didn't just talk to Ian Tolson. I talked to hundreds of kids, but there's only been a handful of kids who really cared about what I had to say. However, over 25 years of talking in the schools, when I watched the kids, those 5 or 6 out of 100 who came and talked to me after the class or came to my office and asked me a few questions, I realized I was not the only person they were asking questions of. They had one of those unique and strange personalities where they go, I want to find successful people and I'm going to talk to them about how to succeed. And then I'm actually going to listen and do it. your book is unique because the good ideas, they're not novel, they're not new. They've been around for millennia.
Hmm.
It's just that too many people, they blow them off, and they're looking for that easier way. There's no easy way. There's just doing it the right way and just slogging around until you get traction.
Wow.
And from in your experience as well, you know that the hardest part about succeeding in America is getting your hand on the first rung of the ladder.
Mhm.
Because once you get your hand on the first rung, the second, third, and fourth rungs are easy to grab. But you gotta talk to people who are on the fifth and sixth rung to figure out how to get to the first rung. But like I said, for the hundred some odd kids that I talked to the year I spoke in your school, you listen. That's what makes you unique. My message is not unique. Your response to it is unique.
Thanks for saying that. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
what are you, 36, 37? How old are you?
Yeah, 35.
Yeah, you're 35. You bought a house, you wrote a book, your story is interesting. Anybody can do that in America. The only difference is you did it.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well,
When I showed up in Montana in 1993,
yeah.
I was 30 years old, had a wife and two kids. It was the first time I had ever been a civilian. I had never not been affiliated with the military. And the military is very insulated. You live on bases, you go to the commissary for your groceries, you go to the base movie theater to watch your movies. So there's not a whole lot of opportunities to rub shoulders with civilians. So you have no idea there's a whole nother world out there. When I came up here, Lynn and I, we didn't know anybody. We had no friends, we had no family, we had no connections. And so we had to build the business from ground zero. But what I did find is that truly successful people, they're not selfish. They
Huh.
love giving advice to people and they love watching young people succeed. And there was a handful of World War II vets and there was a handful of Korean War vets who were as old as my parents and in some cases older than my grandparents who kind of took me under their wing and they said, all right, Joe, I think you should go talk to that person over there. You really, really ought to do this. And, and I'm going, well, this guy, he's kind of a mover and shaker in this small town. I think I'll listen to what he has to say. And I did. And man, the doors open. I would tell young people who are in their 20s, seek out wise, successful people in your community and actually listen to what they have to say.
Wow. Yeah, I like that. I like that. And I'd like to ask, like, what are some of the signs of success do you think would be apparent for someone else to observe so that way they could say for sure that, oh, that person's successful?
I think being at peace is the number one. Now, I've met very, very wealthy people. I've managed the finances of very wealthy people, and I've met with people who don't have two nickels to rub together. And I will tell you that the possession of money does not make you happier beyond a certain point. There's miserable people who have absolutely no financial worries, and there are people who are morons even though they're broke. So there's no honor in being poor if you're poor because you made bad choices. There certainly is honor in taking a vow of poverty where you create and produce and then give it all away. I mean, those kinds of people, we should hold them in the highest esteem. They're rare. There's very, very few people who are poor because they gave it all away. Most people are poor because they made choices and now they have to live with them. So I would say that my definition of success is that I wake up every morning at peace. That I I reconcile with the point that anything that happens in my life is because of the choices that I've made, and I take ownership for those choices. And when I look around and I see some of my friends who are very successful, I observe that they're also at peace.
Mm-hmm.
Years ago when I was in the Marine Corps and I decided to try something else, the Marine Corps required me to go through transition assistance classes. So I had to go to these meetings where all these professionals were helping me to succeed in the outside world. And some of some of these experts taught me how to use the system. They'd say, all right, this is how you can apply for unemployment. And you can get these benefits if you're not working for at least 6 months and yada, yada, yada. So I heard all about all the ways I could use the system to make it. And then I had other experts that came in and they say, okay, well, what color is your parachute? What's your aptitude? What are you good at? And one of the classes that I took, they said that I had strengths in being a farmer, a personal trainer, and finances, and in the world of finance. And I was like, yeah, I'd love to be a farmer. So I started doing research on it. And Ian, statistically, the odds of somebody succeeding as a farmer, unless they inherit the farm from their parents, statistically, it's 0%. It
Wow.
is almost impossible to create a successful farm unless you inherit the land. So with a wife and 2 kids dependent on me, I go, I'm not doing that. So then personal trainer. Well, unless you're a personal trainer to the Hollywood movie stars, you're not going to be, you're going to be living hand to mouth.
Okay.
It's one of those jobs, there's so much job satisfaction that a bazillion people enter that industry and they're all competing and they're lowering their wages to the point so they can do it and they're starving. It's kind of like being a wildlife photographer, is that everybody wants to do it. And so the price of the labor is getting driven way down. Side note, if you want to make a lot of money, sell porta-johns for concerts and parties because nobody wants to do it and it pays extremely well.
I never thought of that.
So here I am. I've taken these classes the military has required me to take.
Okay.
After the assessment, they say, you could be a farmer. And after I do my research, I'm probably going to fail at it. Being a personal trainer, I'd really enjoy it. I'm not going to feed my family doing that. Personal finance. So then it was just a question of where was I going to do it and who was I going to do it with? And Edward Jones allowed me to be my own boss for many years in a small town in Whitefish, Montana. And so I took it. So that's kind of how I got to there.
I like that. Wow. And so I'm curious with the way things have transitioned where Drew is how would you describe it, as like a co-owner of the business? Or
I don't know. I'm retired. I basically, they walked into my office one day and said, do you want to retire? I said, yes. They said, we're prepared to buy you out now. I said, okay. So yeah, I'm making light of it. It's a little bit more complicated than that.
I'm sure it is.
Now, do you know Tom in our office as well?
Yes.
Have you
Yeah,
met Tom? Tom's a fine young man. So I hired Tom knowing that I was going to sell the business to Tom at some point in the future.
Oh, really?
The reason I hired him was so that I could sell the business to him at some point in the future. Seriously.
Clever.
So once I hired Tom, I went and I talked to an attorney
Okay.
and I set up a buy-sell agreement. And with the buy-sell agreement is that I said, Tom, you have first right of refusal to buy this business out. So you can buy it, and here's a life insurance policy. If I die, here's the life insurance policy that will pay my wife for the value of the business. And then Drew, he calls me up one day and he says, hey, Dad, I've got to make a decision about my career. At that time, he was started a window washing business in Indiana, and he was also working for Norfolk Southern Railroad. And I said, well, okay, well, where do you see yourself in 5 years? There's that 5-year number again. He goes, in 5 years, I want to be working for you.
Oh, wow.
And I said, well, I'm not just going to let you work here. You got to meet a couple of criteria first.
Okay.
So I said, I'm not the employment agency for wayward kids who want to come back home. So I said, first of all, you have to have no debt and you have to have $50,000 in the bank, because I want you to be able to tell the story to other clients how you did it as a young man.
That was the reason you asked him to make $50,000?
Yes. Yes. So that he would know how to do it so that he could teach others how to do it.
Wow. I've talked with him about this particular topic way before I ever talked with you. I had no idea that was the forethought.
Yeah. Now, Drew's always been good with money. He's always been able to make it. He's always been able to keep it. But he got married, and so there was some student loan debt involved and some other things. And so a couple years later, he calls me up and says, "Okay, Dad, I'm ready to come work for you." I'm like, "You got $50,000 in the bank?" He goes, "I have $100,000 in the bank." I was like, "Oh." Because I wasn't ready to hire him yet. I said, "Give me 6 months." Had to move some things around.
Wow.
So then, I talked to Tom and I say, "Hey, Tom, when I hired you, I told you that you're going to be the sole owner in the business. I need to know, would your nose be out of joint if Drew came on into the business and became a co-worker and a co-owner?" And he goes, "Absolutely not." He goes, "I would love to have a partner."
Really?
Yeah, which made it really easy for me because could have gotten really touchy, from a family perspective if he had said no, because I'd already promised the business to Tom. So anyway, they ended up, Tom said, "No, I would prefer a partner than doing this by myself." And Drew said, "No, that sounds good to me." So I went back, saw the attorney, and I redid it so where 50% of the business would go to Tom and 50% would go to Drew, and then redid the life insurance policy so that they both would, if I croaked, there'd be money they could use to buy my wife out for the ownership of the shares of the company. So when I turned my plan, this was many, many years ago, but my plan was at age 60, I would start to get out of the business. So I was going to sell 10% of the business to each of them every year over a 5-year period. And then at the end of 5 years, I'd no longer be an owner. So, and then what I would do is with the profits of the firm is that their share of the profits could be used to buy out they could use the profits from the firm to buy into the firm. And after the first year, they said, "Hey, Joe, I think we got this. You don't need to be around for 5 years. If you want to retire now, you can." And I was like, "Yes." And primarily my reason for doing so was, during COVID, the world changed and the job just was not fun anymore. And I was dealing with a lot of the national or the federal regulators, and the quality of service that I was getting from a lot of our vendors in the insurance industry and in the banking industry and in the finance industry, it really eroded. The quality and value of the service I was getting was so low. I was finding myself just getting mad. And Drew and Tom were much younger. They were much more resilient. It was a lot of the things that I get irritated about was just water off their backs. So I said, absolutely. So anyway, we accelerated the process. And so instead of taking 5 years to buy me out, it did 1 year. And I'll tell you, Ian, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. Selling my business to Drew and Tom was not one of them. Those two young men are doing fantastic. And they're taking the business to a much higher level than I was ever able to do myself. It's been one of my greatest life achievements is watching those two really come into their own.
It's so nice hearing the background story to all of this because I've been watching as a bystander as I originally talked with you about investing and finances and then having a transition over the years where I started to talk to Drew a little bit more. You were there, but I would talk to Drew a little bit more. And then having it turn into I was only talking to Drew per the business. And I had no idea all of this was going on in the background. I think that is so fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's been a wonderful story. And like I said, for my now I'm just like you, Ian. I'm a client. They manage my money. I rarely look at my accounts. Drew calls up and said, "Hey, you had a bond come due. What do you want me to do?" I go, "I don't know. What do you want me to do?"
Wow, that's so great. So
Let me circle back around. Yeah, I told you that I had an aptitude for being a farmer and I had an aptitude for being a personal trainer.
Yes.
I can do that for free now. Is that I grow my own food. Last night I traded some goat milk for some cream cheese and homemade bagels. So I'm bartering with friends, so now I have those relationships. I got people coming over to the house tomorrow to see my goats, like a petting zoo. And I work with a bunch of kids in a trail life troop where physical fitness is a big part of our program.
Wow.
So all the things that I was created to do, I now can afford to do because I don't need the money.
And I'm curious, how does that make you feel?
I'm at peace. I am cutting with the natural grain for what I was created to do,
Wow.
and I'm going with the I'm going with the flow of the created order of the universe. So I'm not fighting the system. I'm not waking up every morning going, "Oh, I got to do something I just don't feel comfortable doing." I wake up every morning and go, doing exactly what I chose to do.
Interesting. Interesting. And I'd like to touch on this a little bit because I often hear people say, you got to get out of the comfort zone. And like I even mentioned it in my book, but what is your viewpoint on that? Because at some point being uncomfortable is just being uncomfortable. What is your take on being uncomfortable to the point of growth, but also not getting too uncomfortable to the point where you're just uncomfortable?
It's an excellent question, and I think that age has helped me come to a better idea of what that looks like.
Okay.
One of the things that I've done for a long time is that I've always had physical goals. When I was 50 years old, my goal was to climb up Big Mountain 50 times under 50 minutes.
Wow.
So, and I got to the point where my best time was 36 minutes, and I was routinely getting under 40.
Oh
But I
my
didn't
God.
start there. But when you do it a lot, you get better at it, right?
Yeah.
And then one year I decided I was going to do, when I was 57, I decided to do 57,000 push-ups.
Hey.
And when I was 56, I was going to do 56 double unders with a half-pound rope. So I had all these physical goals. And then last year my goal was to do 20,000 burpees.
Doesn't what?
And burpees, it's an exercise. It's a high impact exercise.
Okay.
Well, at that time I was 60 years old, and I was like, I don't know a whole lot of 6-year-olds doing burpees like I'm doing. So I'm gonna do. So on a slow day, I was doing like 100 burpees, and on some days I was doing up to 500 burpees in a day. Well, that's fine in the wintertime around here, but when I'm doing farm work in the summertime, trying to get my burpees in every week, on top of just keeping up with my farm chores, I was just beat.
Wow.
And I was talking to Drew. You know, Drew's an elite athlete, right? You know that he's like a record holder of several long distance events here in Montana. He's a 50-miler marathoner and does ultra marathons and that kind of stuff. He runs marathons for practice. He's very good at it. He knows the sport. So I'm showing him my data because I had one of those pace count things, heart rate monitors, and
Yeah.
and so I was tracking all of my performance, and I'm going, son, I go, I'm working out hard, but I'm just not getting any better. And he goes, Dad, you're working too hard. He goes, you can't do this and improve. He says, you got to rest. You have to take some time off. And so, from a physical perspective, I haven't done one burpee all summer. Occasionally I do push-ups with the kids, but for the most part, I don't need to exercise because I'm getting plenty of exercise just hauling feed bags. Before we got on this call, I'm out shoveling manure. I mean, I got 3 trailers full of manure I'm moving around the property. So I don't need to be doing burpees and pull-ups and working out in the weight room because I'm getting plenty of exercise already.
Hmm.
And a good friend of mine said, your heart doesn't care how it gets elevated, just elevate it. And that was really good advice. So I think that when you look at music, if the music score on the music sheet was all black dots, it's just going to sound like noise. There has to be some white on the music score for it to be beautiful.
Hmm.
So if you use as an analogy, Ian, is that hard work is important. In fact, I often say that affluence without adversity is toxic in the human condition.
Interesting.
If you get something without working for it, it's probably not good for you. It's going to taint you in a negative way.
Interesting.
So I believe in the idea of adversity, but adversity needs to be done with a purpose. There has to be a higher reason. There has to be an investment in the adversity
Mm.
before it has any value. So I think, in 10 Commandments, you're supposed to honor the Sabbath. That's a day where you're supposed to rest and recreate, and you're supposed to spend time with your Creator, because the natural order of the universe basically says is that you're not supposed to work 7 days in a row.
Mm.
You're supposed to take rest.
Mm.
And if you're having difficulty putting rest into your lifestyle, you need to write on the calendar to make sure that there's time for dead time. So to answer your question, how do you know when some is too much? And I think that is that when you stop having peace, that's an indicator that you're doing it wrong.
I like that. There's a drawing point. There's a fine line.
Yeah, yeah. Years ago, I had a good friend of mine came up with this idea called S.P.R.I.F.
Okay.
And I incorporated it into a lot of the financial plans that I was talking to people about. I may have even talked to you about it at one time, but it's based on the idea of spirituality, physical fitness and health, relationships, intellectual growth, and financial stewardship. If you don't carve time out in your weekly routine to cover your bases for all of those things, at some point the world is going to make you do it. If you let pursuit of money take over your life, your relationships are going to suffer, and your life is going to say, okay, you didn't want to deal with your relationship before, but now you are, but it's going to be through divorce court.
Surprise.
And if you spend all your time, spending time with your kids and your wife and whatever, and you're not growing intellectually, it's going to affect your finances, because your boss is going to say, all your peers, they're growing, they're getting experience, and they're going to classes, and they're learning new things and making themselves more valuable. You're exactly the same value as you were 10 years ago. Why should I pay you for 10 years of experience when you haven't really grown anymore? You're not adding any more value to the bottom line.
Wow.
So it's important for you to continue to grow yourself intellectually. And we're spiritual animals, is that if you do not feed your spirit by having a relationship with your Creator, you're going to end up just being a nihilist, and you're not at peace. So one of the things that I've gotten in the habit of doing the last 15 years or so is that the time between Christmas and New Year's, I'll sit down for a few hours and I'll come up with my S.P.R.I.F goals of things I'm going to try to accomplish in the next year. And I just make them part of my calendar routine to make sure that they get covered. So every morning I get up, first thing I do is I read 2 or 3 chapters of the Bible.
Wow.
And I set time to spend time with friends, where we get together for lunch, or I go over and help on a project. I'm always, reading a quality book or taking a quality class from the teaching company. And if there's one area where I've kind of not been doing a great job is financial stewardship, because heck, I got Drew doing that for me now.
I like your sense of humor.
I'm at milestone age, so I don't pay as much attention to it now as I probably should.
I like that. I never would have guessed the guy giving the financial advice would be taking a break, but I can totally see how that happened.
I tell people who are my age and older is that nobody thinks you're wise if you die in the desert with 2 canteens full of water. So I will tell them, I said, when you start spending money in a way that I think is going to put your family at jeopardy, I'll tell you. But right now, you can afford to go and live a little. You don't have to cut the grass yourself. You can hire somebody to do that. And if you want to go on a round the world cruise, you can afford it. If you want to give $50,000 to your church, I salute you with both hands. I said, you can afford to do it.
Wow. I respect that. One thing caught my eye, and I'd love to end off on this question. Earlier, we were talking about risk versus, in business, and America is made for that. What's your viewpoint on risk, and how do you kind of see the value of taking it, when to take it?
When I was in the Marine Corps, I was in a reconnaissance unit, and we got extra pay for being combat divers
Oh, wow.
and also for being parachutists. And the reason they paid us that extra money is because you got to pay more for life insurance because nobody will insure you when you're doing those kind of activities, right?
Of course.
So there's obviously risk, but you can mitigate those risks by wearing a reserve parachute. And when you scuba dive, you scuba dive with a buddy. So in case you run out of air, you can buddy breathe to get to the surface. So a lot of risk can be mitigated. And when it comes to risk, every decision you make is going to have a risk.
Hmm.
And the only reason I'll take a risk is that if the other option has other risks, which will end up becoming much more costly than the risks that I'm already starting to take.
Interesting. So it's kind of
So
like,
for
go ahead.
so for example, with finance, if you take all of your money and put it in the bank and the government prints a bunch of new money, the money you have sitting in the bank has just become less valuable. I did absolutely nothing during COVID, and the value of my house went up 150%.
That's awesome.
I did nothing, no improvements. But why did it go up? The reason it went up is because the government printed a bunch of money and dumped it into the economy, and it made people's cash worth less. And what actually happened is it made my house worth more.
Wow.
Always going to be that way. It's always going to be that every time the government inflates and prints more money, the people who already own the assets are going to be in better shape than the people who need to buy the assets. So, in Whitefish, Montana today, you probably can't come to Montana and easily buy a house if you're 25 years old.
Anymore.
Go to Arkansas, go to West Virginia, go to Alabama. There are places where you can buy a house for, say, $200,000 and get your foot on the bottom floor. And being the manager of a Walmart in Alabama, you're going to be making pretty close to the same as you're going to be getting being a Walmart manager in San Francisco. Go live in Alabama for a few years. You don't have to live there your whole life, but live there long enough to where you get to on the first rung of that economic ladder. And then at that point, if you're really good, you'll get promoted and get to go take over the San Francisco office.
I like that.
So, I think that here's another good example is that in the military, you get paid on the 1st and the 15th of every month, like clockwork. If you're a lieutenant in the Marine Corps, you get paid exactly what a lieutenant's going to get paid, no matter how good or how bad you are. Everybody gets paid the same. Everybody gets paid on the 1st and the 15th.
Yeah.
The job's kind of dangerous. I mean, they can send you off to some far-flung place and get shot. Okay, you can get all kinds of nasty diseases crawling around the jungle someplace.
Yeah.
So there's risk involved with that security. And so my wife is very, very risk averse, and she was extremely upset when we decided to get out of the Marine Corps, or when I decided to get out of the Marine Corps and go pursue being a financial advisor in Whitefish, Montana, where I knew absolutely nobody, taking over a failing office and turning it around. So, oh my gosh, no. So I said, we're going to do it anyway.
Okay.
So we get up to Montana, and then we started succeeding. And then all of a sudden, I'm starting to have these second thoughts about working for a Fortune 500 company. And my wife's going, and the reason and she says, how are you going to make a living? I said, we're going to make a living the same way I'm making right now, except that the clients will be mine. They won't belong to Edward Jones. She goes, but it's safer. I go, it's not safe. And what had happened was that Edward Jones had bought a financial firm in London. And so then we had an international footprint in the company. So Edward Jones actually had offices in England.
Okay.
So we're in England and Scotland. Well, on a Friday, one month, everybody who worked in England thought they had a job. And on Monday, they all got fired because the company got bought out by another firm. Edward Jones America sold off their holdings in England, and all of those advisors, they got let go.
No way.
So from my vantage point, it was not safe being with a Fortune 500 company who one day could wake up and say, you know what, we just sold you to Merrill Lynch. And Merrill Lynch said, you know what, we've already got an office in Whitefish. We don't need two. So we're going to either consolidate with us in this office or you're going to basically, on your own.
Wow.
So from my vantage point, I figured I was a better risk for managing my life than a corporation was.
Yeah.
So the answer to your question is that the way I manage risk is I look at the risks of the other options and then
Mm,
I weigh them and I go, you know what? What I'm doing right now is actually riskier than going out on my own.
wow. I really like what you said. It just helped me reflect on something that has been impacting my life for about 6 months. And so it really helped me just resolve things.
Good. And yeah, like I said, in our household, Ian Tolson's, we have always been great admirers.
Oh.
Remember when you were in high school, and every time you have a success, we're like, "You rock on, Ian."
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. It means a lot, really. Wow. Well, Joe, this has been such a meaningful conversation and for me to not know any of the background and everything that went on to sitting here and having a conversation with you today, it really makes my day and it really fills my cup that I was able to have this type of conversation with you.
Well, I certainly enjoyed myself, and it was really, really an honor that you asked me to do this because I had a lot of fun.
I'm glad. I'm glad. Really. That's
And
amazing.
it's neat seeing somebody who's 35 when you knew him when he was 16.
Yeah. I never thought of it like that. It's been a few years. Wow. Wow. What a great day.
Really is.
Awesome. Cool. Wonderful. Well, Joe, is there anything else that you'd like to share or say to everyone before we kind of end off here?
The only thing that I say is every time I talk to you, I say the same thing. I am so proud of where you've ended up, Ian. Um, uh, yeah, I remember meeting you on the corner of the Whitefish Mall when I was going down to pick up something at the UPS store,
Uh-huh.
and I ran into you on the street. And in those days, you had a heck of a lot more hair than you have right now.
This is true.
And you kind of had a 7-day old scruffy beard. You weren't wearing any shoes. You were wearing some cutoff shorts, and in those days you were smoking one of those vapor things.
Yep.
And you came up to me and you said, "Hey, you're that guy." And I go, I'm sure I'm that guy." You said, "You're the guy that came and talked to us at our school." And I go, "Oh yeah, I did." And I said, "I really enjoyed myself." He said, "Yeah, you said I really, really got a lot out of that class." And I said, "Well, good." He goes, "I need to talk to you sometime about what I should do." And I said, "You should." I gave you one of my cards,
Yeah.
and I said, "You should come by and set up an appointment." Well, you decided to do it like in the next 10 minutes. So, so, so I get back to the office. I go to my office, and I'm in there. I'm starting to work. I have my headset on. I'm calling clients, and all of a sudden, the, the intercom is my secretary, and she says, "Joe, could you come out here right now?" I said, "What's going on?" He says, "There's this homeless person out here, and he wants to see you." And I said, "What?" So I come to my office, and it was you. And you said I should come in and talk to you some about my future. And I said, "I did. Why don't you come on in?" And like I said, Ian, what makes you special is that I gave you some advice and you took it, and the rest is history.
The thing I love about this story and hearing that as well is I actually have the 8 milestone markers. I ended up asking for a photo of it and I printed it off and I put it in a uh, I'm trying to remember the word for it, but it's basically like a placard or something. Like I framed it, and I have it in my room, and I look at that almost every day.
Good. Well, Ian, you're now at that point in life where you have transitioned from just being a man to being a leader.
Thanks.
I'm at the point in my life where I'm making the transition from being a leader to being a patriarch.
Mm.
So now I don't direct people on what they do. I sit on the sidelines and cheer. But you're at the age now where you need to be teaching others. You need to be teaching the next generation of Ian Tolsons how to have Ian Tolson like success.
Oh, thanks. That means a lot. Wow. 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 Well, thanks, Joe. This really does mean a lot, and I appreciate you sharing the stories and everything that you're doing. It made a great impact on me, and I'm excited to share this out with other people too.
No matter what happens for the rest of the day, Ian, I'm going to be in a good mood because of our conversation today.
That's awesome. Cool. Wonderful. And with that being said, everybody, thank you for watching and enjoying the episode.
Thanks for having me, Ian.
Welcome.
Okay.
Alrighty.
So do we sign off now, or do we
Yeah,
just okay? All right, we'll see you again. Bye bye.
that sounds good. It was good speaking with you, Joe.
Likewise.
Thank you.